Welcome to the Nick Dealer Info Podcast, where we talk about stuff and more stuff. Welcome, everybody. How we doing today? Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite bands growing up, man. Little Green Day today. Listen, there's not much that you can't say about this band that isn't great, unless you're one of them people, that says, they're not punk and they sold out and yada, 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 yada. But, you know what, man, forget about those people because, they're a bunch of haters. I got news for you. If I was in a band, man, and I got signed and I can go make millions and millions and millions of dollars playing on tour, you're damn right I would I would sell out. So, I don't know what those people's problems are, but, talking Green Day, man, it's, it really is one of my favorite bands of all time. And, I've been to see them a handful of times, maybe about 4 or 5, And, every time I see them, they just seem to get better and better. And it's like these guys don't age, man, My brothers, who are older than me, mind you, and listen to, like, Def Leppard and Poison, which I love, I'm just saying, they were saying things like, Green Day, won't be around in 2 years, one-hit wonders. Yeah, right, man. Those dudes were wrong. I know a lot of people that say, they've been listening to Green Day since, the Slappy Hours and Kerplunk and yada, yada, yada. But I'm not one of those people, actually. I didn't find out about Green Day, living on the opposite side of the country. I didn't find out until Dookie came out. I can remember it pretty well, man. I was sitting on the couch, and I was watching MTV, and the first thing I heard about Green Day was Basket Case, and I see this dude come up in a mental hospital, and he starts playing, I see him there with Bluey, his guitar, and Big Dirt and Trey Cool. Jason White wasn't part of the band yet, but I remember seeing this video and just, wow, there's a lot of rock and some cool drumming and, lyrics. And, I remember being just blown away with Green Day. So immediately there was a rush for me, to kind of figure out what else this band really had out. And you kids nowadays, man, you're spoiled, man. You just go to the internet and say, you type in the band name and it shows everything they've ever done. Download here without paying for it, great stuff. But me, we didn't really have the internet then, so it was around, but it wasn't used like it was used today. I certainly didn't have a computer to use it. So I'd gone to Looney Tunes, which is the local record store where I grew up, and the big things that they had there were like bootlegs and live concerts, and that was pretty much the only place you could get anything like that there. So I found this one which was like a live concert from I don't even know where, man, but and that was the only time that I've ever heard the tunes before Dookie came out. Eventually they did kind of re-release the CDs, Kerplunk and, Slappy Hours, but they may or may not have had all the same tunes on them. Like I remember something about the Slappy Hours having Green Day on it, and the other one was like 1,052 smoothed out Slappy Hours or something, which I guess was how long it took to record the record. So eventually they just combined them, Slappy Hours and whatever else, and then made that happen. But man, I remember when Dookie came out, and I was really excited, and I listened to it through and through, man. Just front to back, man. I had to learn that whole entire album on the guitar, and I absolutely had to learn to play all those songs on drums, and I was just enamored with that album. And then came even more. I actually did one of their songs in my middle school variety show with my buddy Rob Story, who I guess now is in prison for stealing catalytic converters or something. At least that's what I hear through the grapevine. And my drummer at the time was my shop teacher. I guess they call that technology now. And his name was Mr. Dupre. And I haven't heard anything about him. I don't know if he's still kicking or not. But, man, we played When I Come Around and Basket Case, for our, middle school variety show. And, I think back on it now, man, and that could have very well been my first big public performance, plus 20 people. Anyway, I'd always play backyard parties or house parties or whatever, but I think that one was my first gig with, well over 300 people watching, which is interesting. But, at the time, man, I had like a beginning Ibanez RX-20 or something, and, I'd plug it into, an Ibanez tube screamer pedal, and then I plugged it into an old 1960-something Lafayette guitar amp, which was so old and so cheap, it didn't even have distortion in it, That's why I had to use the pedal, and I had got it from my uncle. Man, people play with all kinds of fun stuff. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a little tangent here. We talk about Green Day. So, I can remember the first time I saw this band was at like the Randall's Island soccer field up in New York, and it was a Warped Tour festival, I think, or something like that. And I remembered Green Day didn't play till later on that night. So I remember I spent the day at the Tiki Tent or something like that, watching these really up and coming bands, and Sum 41 was one of them. And man, same deal, dude. I fell in love with that band right there. They were awesome, and it was kind of weird because right after they finish playing or whatever, they crack a beer and they come over and just start talking to you. They're trying to make new fans, and there wasn't anything but maybe 8 or 9 people watching at the time, and so anyway, it was really cool to meet them, and we waited for Green Day, and man, it was worth every second of the wait because they were just amazing. I don't know what year that was, but it was definitely one of the greatest concerts of my life. Some years later on, they put out more albums and got accused of selling out, and people just I don't know, man. It's like they didn't like the later albums or something, but to me, they just got better and better and better, and they're still just getting better and better and better. I know a lot of people hold the opinion that they kind of fell off with Uno Dos Tres, but totally not me, man. I like 4 or 5 of those tracks from each album. It's not to say like all of them are hits, they're not Dookie repeats or American Idiot repeats or the Revolution Radio new album. Just amazing albums, but man, I love all them tunes, and I think if you take yourself out of the whole they're not punk or they're posers or whatever whatever it is that people say, and you actually just listen to the songwriting, and you listen to the albums, and you take the lyrics into account. Not to mention a whole entire rock opera. You know, American Idiot. I went to see the musical, and I'm not really a musical guy. But I went to see it because it was Green Day, and man, I love it. And there was some. I remember just the first couple lines of the musical. Man, this dude got up there and just started cursing, and talking, and that kind of stuff. And I remember a lot of people leaving the theater right at the beginning of the musical. A couple of them like had their kids with them, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. So I think they possibly didn't realize that there were that many F-bombs or bad language in it. But I got into it, man. It was a great musical. American Idiot's just about leaving that town, that you grew up in, and just growing up and realizing kind of that everything stinks, and it's so true, because I know I felt that way up until, oh man, I don't know, till I left my hometown, and I went away to college, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to get out of that place. This place stinks. There's nothing to do here. The funny part is you move away and you kind of miss home. At least when you come from Long Island, you miss the food. You miss having a beach within 10 minutes of every direction. I miss crabbing at the docks, that kind of thing. But when you live in the middle of the country, because, I went to Indiana, man, you're really, really far from a beach. And you're really, really far from great food, in my opinion. I'm sure there was some good places to eat there. I'm not saying there weren't, but, you didn't really get fresh seafood or incredible Italian food, and no bagels, no bakeries. The closest thing that I remember in Indiana was like Tom's Donuts. It was the closest thing to a bakery they had. And, they had like Bear Claws and that kind of stuff, but they didn't really have, it wasn't really a bakery. You get the Italian cookies in the white box with the string around it. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to, bakeries per se. But I think that it's just nostalgia of missing that hometown, and they didn't really have any of that in American Idiot. They just all wanted to get out of there so bad. So let's move it right along to some of the Green Day stuff that we love, favorite tracks and whatnot. So if we go all the way back to Smoothed Out Slappy Hours, my favorite song is Paper Lanterns, for sure. I really, 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 really dig it. It's got great lyrics in it. Which is even more relevant the more you listen to it. If we go to Kerplunk, definitely Christie Road is my favorite song. I know that Welcome to Paradise featured then, but it actually was nowhere near my favorite song on the album. Moving right along, after Kerplunk, Dookie, man, there isn't enough I can say about Dookie. Just amazing album. Every song is great. I think my favorite song on Dookie. Yeah, this is tough. Man. I don't know, probably Sassafras Roots. Great tune, and then came Insomniac, and Insomniac was basically just plug the guitars into the Marshalls, turn the volume up, and crank it, and see what happens. that album was kind of a way to say that we don't care.